Baseball Show is presented by BetMGM. Use promo code JustBaseball, all one word, all caps, to start betting with the king of sportsbooks. Luis Arraez is hitting 400. Rick Hahn, the GM of the White Sox, needed to defend his first-year manager. The Astros have dropped 5 in a row, and the Twins might win the shittiest division in recent memory. We've got a lot to talk about, but I want to start with this Titanic thing that's going on. Jack and Aram on the Just Baseball Show, and you and I have spent the morning reading and watching and listening to stuff on this thing, Ocean Gate. That's the Titanic Exploration thing that has gone missing, and it feels ragtag. That's my one takeaway from this.
Yeah, there is. So for those that don't know, there's, and correct me wherever I'm wrong, because I've been very this story has captivated me, but not enough to read the whole lowdown. But I read a recent CNN update as of last night at 1 a.m. when I was in bed. What the fuck? Yeah. So basically, Subway, New York's affecting me here. Submarine goes underwater. They want to see Titanic wreckage 2.5 miles down. Yeah. And it's the people in there are just kind of people that just wanted to have fun and explore. These aren't researchers, right? Is this just wealthy people that wanted to go check out the wreckage? Am I wrong on that?
No, you're right. So I watched a 10-minute CBS News feature that shows you what I do.
So that's the thing. So then the CBS News feature resurfaced recently, right? Because they were hey, by the way, someone connected this submarine that's missing
is Ocean
is the same one that was on CBS a couple years back or whenever it was. And then someone rewatched it and the details of that CBS piece were
funny in the moment, but now it's terrifying.
It was no shit, this thing's lost.
Yeah. So the gist is, and I watched the 10-minute feature in its entirety. So the gist is the Titanic is sunk about 400 miles east of the easternmost point of North America. So you go to the easternmost part of Canada, which is about 150, 200 miles north of New York, I want to say. And you launch from there and you go about 400 miles. And the only people before this Ocean Gate thing to see the Titanic were scientists in 2-man dives, explorations with submarines. You're 2.5 miles underwater. The pressure there is absolutely insane. So they were only in submarines and scientific exploration dives that could handle 2 people. But then you've got this guy that started Ocean Gate, and it is travel for billion. It's $250,000.
It's like SpaceX. It's like SpaceX.
One of the guys that's unfortunately missing right now on that thing was on Bezos's rocket thing, went to space last year and went to the Titanic this year. He said they had a guy that won the lottery that did it. They said they had a guy that mortgaged their home that did it. $250,000 to get in this. They said it's the size of a minivan. There are no seats or anything. There's a toilet with no door. It just kind of sits there. So if you got to poop on this 12-hour dive, the whole thing's going to smell like shit. It's the most ragtag thing ever. And we were watching it, pieces of it. He controls it with a video game controller.
It's like a GameCube controller. He's oh yeah, this is how we control it. Yeah, it's not very complicated. And then he pointed at some little piece on the ceiling, was yeah, I got this at Camping World. Yeah. Are you crazy?
They use construction piping as ballast for that thing. It's nuts. It's an 8-day thing. You go out for 4 days to get there. It's a 12-hour dive in this thing, in this submarine that is put together, and there's no way out from the inside. That's the thing. They need a crew to undo 16 bolts or something on the outside to let you out of this thing and secure you in.
It is the most ridiculous thing ever. If somebody told me before I get in a submarine 2 miles below the surface that they purchased one of the parts at Camping World and then show me a fucking GameCube remote,
like a Logitech. It's apparently it's a
it's not even a good one. Those are shitty remotes. Those are in the bad, the pre-owned area of GameStop. That's insane. So praying for a positive outcome here, but don't think that you can really count on that. Right? Crazy story. Absolutely crazy story.
No, nuts story. And like, it was one of those things where the CBS News feature, like, you laugh when they show you the video game controller controlling it because everybody had made it at this point. But now that, it's looking bad, and same with you, like, I'm hoping for the best. Like, now that you see where shit can go wrong, you're like, wow, you probably shouldn't have controlled that thing with a gaming controller, or like probably shouldn't have purchased parts from Camping World. So no, man, it sucks, but it is a fascinating story. And like, we're sitting here, I'm in Indy, you're in New York, and it's like, I would never do this I wouldn't be paid $250,000, let alone pay $250,000, because it kind of feels like, bad shit can happen immediately. But we'll get to baseball now. I want to start with Luis Arraez getting over 400. He's got 3 5-hit games this month. Come on.
It's one of those things where it's how many different ways can we like talk about it? I'm not comparing it to Ohtani because like Ohtani's totally different, but in the respect of like he pitches, he hits, and like Peter's wrinkles are like, oh, he's so fast too. Like with Arraez, I think the most remarkable part about it, because it feels like we revisit this topic and we have to be talking about this right now. I think the most remarkable part about Luis Arraez is every time you think he's finally going to slip away from 400, he climbs right back in a matter of 3 games. And it's harder to do that the longer the season goes on. Obviously, it's easier to keep that, average where it is, but it's harder to get it back up, especially when it's 378, which is what he dropped down to. To get that back up to 400 mid-June, like that is insane. You have to go 5 for 5, 4 for 5, and that's exactly what he did. It's one of those things where I've never watched a hitter where you expect them to get a hit. Such a humbling sport. Everything is stacked against you. Hitting is harder than it's ever been. And I'm surprised when Arraez doesn't get a hit. And it's crazy. Most of his outs are pretty well hit baseballs. So it's just been remarkable to watch, man. And I like that Luis Arraez is making batting average cool again. Yep. You can't say it doesn't matter. You can't ignore it because it's so remarkable what he's doing in that department. And it's just been a pleasure to watch.
So Luis Arraez has a 2.5% swinging strike rate. The second lowest swinging strike rate is Quan at 3.9. So he's almost 1.5 better, 1.5% better than the next best guy in baseball. That is an incredible margin here. Luis Arraez has 102 hits. He has 15 strikeouts. And you mentioned like how hard it is to get back when you drop to 370. Like this guy's down month was May when he hit 330. It's incredible. He's hitting 455 in 16 games in June.
And it gets even crazier. Runners in scoring position this year, 464, 529, 554 with more doubles than strikeouts. With men on, 444, 504, 556. So when people use and I know this is a minority and this is just like the loud minority that are just stupid on Twitter. We're like, oh, he just hits a bunch of singles. Like, yeah, okay. But he hits a bunch of singles and doubles with runners on base. That generally is good. If you're hitting near 500 with runners on base, you are a very productive baseball player, because if you have a guy on first, he might get to third. If you have a guy on second, he's scoring. Arraez has driven in a fair amount of runs too. Like it is a really remarkable thing to watch. And you think about it, if he can flirt with 400, which, we'll see. I still think it's really, really, really difficult. But Arraez himself has said it's not impossible, but it's really hard. Yeah. Baseball would be so blessed over the last 3 years. Like people talk about like where baseball is at as a sport. And I think that it's in as good of a spot as it's been in. We've had Shohei Ohtani revolutionizing the game with the pitching and hitting that we've seen on display. I mean, he's become the talk of the sports world with that. You have Aaron Judge chasing, Roger Maris's record last year, which was remarkable and awesome. You have Ohtani still doing what he's doing, but now you might have a 400 chase with Luis Arraez. And I'll tell you what, I think that, he's not a Yankee, so it might not have the same amount, but for baseball fans, I think that will come with just as much, if not more fanfare than the 60 home runs that I think, people were locked in on. You have the Maris, Judge, Yankees component, but in terms of just like, wow, is he really going to do this? I think people will be just as clocked into, a 400 chase in 2023.
When do you think they start to dial in? Like, I think, the avid baseball fans and us obviously are already dialed into what Arraez is doing. But when do you think the common public is going to start tapping into Luis Arraez? Like the joke with Judge last year was on your college football Saturdays, ESPN was cutting into college football with Judge ABs. Obviously Judge was already past the 50 marker there. If Arraez is hitting 395 on August 15th, you think people are tapped in?
Yes, absolutely. And that was kind of the range I was going to give is like mid-August. It's a little different with the home run chase with Judge because you can kind of say, oh, he's on pace for this.
Yeah.
And then you can watch him climb up on that pace and see if he maintains that pace. With the 400 chase, batting average chase, it's not about being on pace for anything. It's sustaining a level of excellence, which is just really, really hard. They're both incredibly difficult, but one's harder to project because you could go 0 for 20 and then it just kind of falls off where, you can hit a home run once every few games and you could be 1 for 10, but you're still on track. So it's going to be really interesting. I think that will captivate a lot of people because you have a lot of the people that swore off baseball or, I don't think there's that many people that did that, but a lot of the older people maybe that, said, oh, this game has changed, nobody hits for average anymore. Like that might reel them back in.
Yeah. It might. I think it's lazy. I think that's a super lazy take that people have because some of the best players in baseball have incredibly low K rates. I think that is the argument here. Like, oh, there's too much swing and miss in the game. Look at the fucking best players in baseball, man. Like Yordan Alvarez is a sub 20% K rate. Luis Arraez is in a 400 chase. Wander Franco has like a 10% K. That's like what these guys do. The best players are not egregious strikeout guys. The only ones that are egregious strikeout guys that are considered like next level are Judge. Who else?
Ohtani, like some of the most prolific power hitters
But the old guard likes Ohtani because he does something unique.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a yelling at cloud thing, but like this
100%
yell at cloud crowd back into baseball.
And I think, it also will just kind of get the buzz going again. There's something to watch. There's something to monitor. Everybody wants to see history, no matter what the sport is. And they'll start to pay attention to that. And I think it's just a great way to reel in more fans. Obviously, Mike Trout could be considered a high strikeout guy too. Yeah. If we're talking about that, but yeah, I'm excited. And of course it's good for baseball in the respect that it's happening for a small market team. We're talking about all these small market teams having, good years and some of these teams that have not been competitive in a while. And I think, it's nice to have Jazz Chisholm was supposed to be that marketable star that brings excitement to Miami. And I still think he can be, but he's hurt as he often is. And right now it's Arraez that's, bringing a lot of attention towards the Marlins. So, that's got to be great for the franchise. And I can tell you from what I've seen, the biggest media scrum we've seen all season. And it was on a Monday night yesterday at the Marlins game now that the hockey season's over, basketball's over, and, we'll see how baseball does out there. But, Arraez definitely is a big help.
And it's really cool, man. Like you've got Sandy underperforming. You've got Jazz on the shelf, but Yuri Perez is starting his candidacy, like he's starting his career on this perfect trajectory. So there's so much excitement here. And if Sandy improves, if Jazz is healthy, and if Yuri continues to do what he's doing, along with Arraez, I mean, Miami is like a topic of national baseball conversation, which is cool.
Bizarre to me. That's so crazy to me. Jorge Soler, I mean,
Soler.
21 homers. So be interesting to see how he keeps going.
Before we move off Arraez, I do want to give you a golf clap because when this trade went down, you said a guy like this can thrive in a spacious outfield like the one they have in Miami. You know what he's hitting at the Depot?
No.
437 at Lone Depot Park.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was one when I did the dive into, I wrote the breaking down the trade and how he fits in, and people were saying, oh, he's going into a pitcher's park. Now he's going to hit no home runs. Maybe, but actually we mapped it out and all of the home runs he hit actually would have been gone at Lone Depot. But even that aside, way more space for that dude to work with he likes to deposit balls all over the place. But then on top of that, he's got enough juice to hit it through the gap. So he's got a lot of room. There's a big playground for Arraez, and it's cool to see it working out that way. I mean, great pickup by the Fish.
Yeah, 364 on the road, 437 at Lone Depot, which is really cool. Joey Votto made his return on Monday night, and he had some interesting things to say. He went yard. He had a 2-run single. Like, hey, the homer was really cool. The 2-run single was really cool. The emotional conversation with Jim Day after the game was really cool. But, maybe the coolest thing was what he said pregame when he said, I feel like I'm coming back to a different team, and it feels like I'm getting my big league call up for the second time. It's America's team at this point. The fucking Cincinnati Reds, man.
All this team needed was the lovable veteran on his last leg. And now they got that. This team checks every box now in terms of like, his last shoulder, which the way he talked about that surgery, it sounds like it was a really, really like serious one. Like, I don't know exactly what it was, but it sounded like there were some doubts there, and clearly there were. I mean, they shut him down on his rehab assignment. He did not look good. You saw him.
I was there for that week before they shut him down, and dude, he was miserable. Like, it was really hard for me to watch. I was like, dude, this is not Votto at all.
And I don't know if he'll really get even close to what he was in 2021, but if he can be better than what he was last year, which, I think he will be, and just be a serviceable player for them, what he brings beyond that is going to be so valuable to a team that's so young. And it's awesome to see. I listened to his interview with SVP after, on ESPN, on SportsCenter, and just how in tune he is, and how I would say like his ability to read the room, understand that this team is doing something that's special and big for Cincinnati, and not make it about himself. Really, it was the remarkable part. Genuinely wants the team to succeed, doesn't know how many games he has left. This is probably it, and doesn't care. It's not about him. And that really stood out to me. And it seemed very genuine. And he just seemed excited to be a part of it. And to me, that was coming from a guy who wasn't sure he'd be back here. Yep. Like, I really think that there was a point in time where he wasn't sure if he was going to get back on the big league field and be able to perform. And I think the fact that he's able to do that now is kind of the perfect way to send him off. I don't know if he's retiring. I'd assume that there's a good chance he is after this year, especially if the Reds have a nice finish. And it just seems like the guy's having fun and soaking it all in. And, he deserves that. Reds fans deserve that. And I think he can still serve a role for them on the field too. This guy can still hit home runs. He can still walk, and he can still be a productive piece.
Yeah. So obviously biggest impact that Votto is going to have is in the dugout with young guys, with McLean, with Ellie De La Cruz, with all these guys that are coming up right now. When CES comes up, like, that's the perfect baton pass. I mean, you want to talk about Miggy to Torkelson, like Votto to CES is poetic as well. So like, he's going to help with those guys. He also just injects this fun dynamic to it. And we talk about, the veteran on the young team. Like, the reason that we loved, I think, the St. Louis Cardinals in 21 and 22 was they had that 3-tier aspect to their roster. They had the young, exciting pieces like O'Neill and Carlson and, Gorman last year and Yepes last year. Then they had, the early 30s superstars in Arenado and Goldschmidt. But then they had the trio of vets in Wainwright, in Pujols, in Yadier Molina. And that layering, that idea that Yadi Molina could talk to Nolan Gorman is super exciting. And I think that layering of Votto being able to talk to Ellie De La Cruz and still help out with Jonathan India's maturation process. India's not a vet yet. Like,
no. But he's playing like one, and I think he's kind of carrying himself like one, which is cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. And I think he was kind of thrusted into that situation with Votto's absence. But now India can do him, and Votto can take Steer under his wing, and can take McLean under his wing, and Ellie De La Cruz under his wing. And I just think that this dynamic can make them lovable. Do you know who their B-War leader is this year, by chance? The Cincinnati Reds?
Cincinnati Reds B-War leader? Gosh, like Jake Fraley.
TJ Friedel, good guess.
TJ Friedel, I know it's going to be one of those two guys.
So I guess the question now becomes, what does the best version of a healthy Reds lineup look like? through this year. And you can put CES in this lineup if you want.
I feel like you've got to have Votto in there, right? I mean, it's Joey Votto. If he struggles, then, I think he'll happily take a bench role, and you got still a really good pinch hitter who can get on base, grind out at bats, and, leave the yard at any moment. But I would say the best version is Tyler Stevenson catching, and Joey Votto DHing, Steer at first, De La Cruz at third, McLean at short. And then you got India at second, and then the outfield with Friedel, Fraley, and then maybe CES and right. Like that, if he looks okay out there, I don't hate that. You got Senzel, you got Benson, you got a few other options. You can kind of mix and match there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was gonna take a crack at it and do Stevenson catching, Votto DHing. I would go Steer at first. Or no, I would go CES at first, actually. I'd go India at second, McLean at short, Elliott third, Steer in left, Friedel in center, Fraley in right.
That also was probably better. if CES is not catching on quick in the outfield, I think that would make more sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how America's team goes about it, especially with Hunter Green out with a hip issue now. So hope that's.
Thank goodness it's a hip, though. I was worried like arm issue. So hips can be iffy, but I'll take that over an arm.
For sure. All right. I've got a soundbite here of Rick Hahn, the general manager of the White Sox, reacting to something that John Heyman, I don't know if it was reporting, but Heyman speculated that Pedro Grifol, the manager of the Chicago White Sox, could be one and done. And I just want to play Rick Hahn's rebuttal to that. Pulling it up right now. I've got it. Okay.
There was a very well-respected out-of-town reporter speculated about Pedro's job security on a local sports station. You guys who are here day in and day out, especially the beat group that spends the amount of time talking to me or talking to others around the front office and hearing how we operate, have heard me say before that this underperformance that we've had so far, or any of the issues we've had thus far in this season, is not on Pedro and on the coaching staff. I don't think we could have been more clear about that. And I understand that people, especially in this day and age of all media, much less sports media, clicks matter and ratings matter and palace intrigue matters. And I'm not going to be able to solve that here in my position, nor is it my responsibility to solve that. But as we get closer to the deadline, as we get closer towards the end of the season and people want to speculate on what's going to happen around here and what's not going to happen, I would caution against putting too much credibility in reports that don't come from people who are here all the time.
Ooh, yep. I like that little finish there.
Yep, a really interesting finish. Credit to CHGO for being in that scrum and getting that sound. I thought that was interesting coming from the general manager of the White Sox, and he's right. Heyman is a very well-respected national guy. He's a national insider. He's not there every day. He talks a lot about the Cubs and White Sox on 670 The Score, I think multiple times a week. But, I mean, you can only be around an organization so much. And I'm with Rick Hahn. I think that's a misread from Heyman.
Yeah.
While Pedro Grifol is not, turning water into wine right now for the Chicago White Sox, this shit ain't his fault.
This is a team that has underperformed. It's the exact team that's underperformed for the last half decade. It's nothing to do with Pedro Grifol. And I would say, what do you expect him to be able to do with this ball club? This team has just consistently underperformed, consistently been injured. And you know what? I'd argue that he's doing a pretty decent job, all things considered. You know why? Because I haven't heard about him. And that's the difference. The last guy, if you weren't hearing about him on the field, you're hearing about him off the field. So I think that there's a level of give this guy his chance with a different team with some new faces, with players who are bought in. And I think they're going to do just that. I appreciate, Rick Hahn, and I'm sure Grifol does too, coming out and being willing. Most GMs speak in code, even if it's something that they could easily just not speak in code on. Yeah. But he didn't mince words. He was very direct and said, no, Rick, Grifol is fine. So I really think it would be idiotic to fire Grifol at this point. There's so many more things that need to be focused on, and they need some continuity, I think, at the helm. That's furthest from their issues. I think the speculation should be all around the roster and what do they do with each of these players. And we've talked about it in the past. I think it's trade a lot of them, but I think they really got to burn this team down and let Grifol kind of start fresh with a new group.
Yeah. Like, that's my thing. I hear that and I say, yeah, Rick, you're right. It's not Pedro Grifol's fault that Tim Anderson has a 580 OPS, and it's not Pedro Grifol's fault that Elvis Andrus is hitting 200 with a 530 OPS, and it's not Pedro Grifol's fault that Yohan Moncada is on the IL again, and you owe him about $20 million next year, and you're paying Yasmani Grandal like 59. What, you're paying him, I think, $18 million this year to play 59 games, and I mean, like, suck defensively behind the plate.
He's cooked.
It's
actually Rick Hahn's fault for the most part. Like, not all of it, but like the team sucking is Rick Hahn's fault.
That's the thing. I also think that it's a little short-sighted from Heyman, who does an excellent job, to assume that they're going to be one and done with a manager when Jerry Reinsdorf has notably never let anyone go in the history of ever, and like brought Tony La Russa back in 2021 because he fucked up a firing in 1986. Like, he doesn't forget things. He's not ready to piss people off. So why is he going to go one and done with a manager? I mean, this division is terrible. Do I think the White Sox can win a terrible division this year? I don't, like, at all.
And like, even if they can like float around and hang around, this team's getting bludgeoned in the playoffs immediately. And I know your goal is to make the playoffs, but like, that's if all things go right, everything goes perfectly. Okay, great. You make the playoffs. Who gets the ball game one? Michael Kopech? No, obviously it's Dylan Cease.
3.5.
No, it's Dylan Cease. But you go Dylan Cease to Giolito to Michael Kopech
to Lance Lynn and his 6.5.
I'm good. If I were the White Sox, first of all, keep manager. Second of all, I would trade a lot of different dudes. I would consider trading. I think there's a serious culture issue, and that's coming. No reporting, no insight. This is just me being speculative. But see, I'm speculating on the environment of a clubhouse, not someone's job. I just don't see how these personalities mesh. I think it's clear that they don't all mesh. I think it's clear that when you have this much volatility on one roster, you're rarely going to succeed, because it's like one guy's off the IL, one guy goes back on. It's a revolving door. But I would say that the situation is not as bad as we feel like it is, because, and I'm curious what you think about this, Jack. I think that Oscar Colas is a young building block. I really do. I know he didn't do great, but I don't think he was ready. We talked about that. I thought he needed a little bit more time, and this team has kind of been chaotic. So it was a lot of pressure on him. I think Lenyn Sosa is a decent building block and a good young piece to have. You hold on to Andrew Vaughn. You extend Dylan Cease. Let's say you keep Luis Robert. You can't get rid of Andrew Benintendi, but then you piece it together around those guys. You replenish the farm system a little bit by trading a Giolito and trading a couple of these other guys. I think this could get better sooner than people expect. Colson Montgomery's been hurt this year, but that's still, I think, one of the more underrated prospects in baseball. He can get up relatively quick. Brian Ramos, I just got off the IL in the minor leagues. I really like him. They've drafted a little bit better of late. The system has improved. It's not great, but I don't think it's this catastrophe to the degree of some of the other like worst situations in baseball if they play their cards right, but they never do.
Do you know much about this Jose Rodriguez that's getting up for his big league debut?
Yeah, it was, people looked at the numbers on Rodriguez and they're like, oh, like, why would they call up a guy with a 702 OPS? He started really slow and then has just kind of gone nuclear. So I think they're kind of riding a hot hand here and trying to see what he can do.
Yeah.
He was swinging a lot better as of late.
That's what they did with Sosa last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Sosa. But I think Rodriguez is a building block too. I don't know if he's going to succeed right away, but he's really toolsy. He's really talented, and he just turned 22. They've got pieces. I really think if they play their cards right, you trade those bullpen arms, Kendall Graveman. We just talked about how it's a seller's market.
Yeah.
They could cash in big time on some of these guys. Like a Giolito is going to get you a bigger haul, I think, than a Giolito would ever get you as a rental.
For sure.
Especially with how he's pitching right now.
Yes.
They can play their cards right and circumvent make it a retool, not a rebuild. Because White Sox fans don't want to do another rebuild. That would kill baseball in Chicago, in the South Side.
Yes.
I think you can retool.
I think so too. Giolito through 15 starts has a 3.5, and he's striking out a hitter per 9. Like, this is the best version of Giolito we've seen since he threw that no-hitter in 20. Did he have a good 21? He had a good 20. I
always mix him up with what years he was good and what years he was bad.
Yeah, I think, was it 19 and 20 that he was really good? In 21, he had a 3.5. Nah, he was good in 21. But like last year was the brutal one. He had a 4.9. He's got a 3.5 in 15 starts so far this year. Cease is underperforming. You're not moving Cease, like you said. I think White Sox fans jumped ship on Lenny Sosa because he has really struggled in 2 big league cameos at this point, but it's too early to fully jump ship on him. Colas, I think, is in not the best graces with White Sox fans because he struggled in his first big league cameo, but you can't jump ship on Colas. I'm with you, man. Like, there are some guys in that bullpen that can sneaky get you some great prospects in return. Not top 100 guys, but some guys that are outside of that. Kendall Graveman can get you a fringe top 100 guy. Think about Brown. Yep. Gregory Santos, with the control that he's got, and he's putting together a 2.5, he can get you a 10 to 15 prospect in another organization. Keenan Middleton right now with his sub 2 can get you a 15 to 20 prospect in another organization. Yeah. And in that bad system right now, a 15 to 20 guy in a good organization can be a top 10 guy in yours.
Yep. And then think about what you can get for maybe a TA. Yep. Or maybe you shop Eloy a little bit. And the good thing with those guys is you don't have to trade them.
No.
The leverage is yours, but there's so few bats, as we just talked about. And I think it's perfect that we're following up with this episode. You have a lot of leverage here if you're the White Sox.
Tons.
Play your cards right. I think the worst thing they can do is sit on their hands, because that's what they've been doing. And I can understand them sitting on their hands the last couple of years, because you look at the roster, you're like, okay, if it all clicks, this could be great.
Like last year was Jake Diekman for Reese McGuire. That was their only.
That was it. That was it. And I was fine with them not subtracting, because they were like, you could see it possibly all coming together.
Yeah,
it's clearly not now. You look at like next year's free agency. You could probably go sign a couple cheaper guys. You, again, replenish that farm system. It's probably going to be one bad-ish year, but you could make the case that by 2025, a lot of these pieces could, start to be coming together for a new young core. Benintendi's still going to be there. You'd still have Eloy, Vaughn. If he's healthy, you got Robert, and then you've got some of those young prospects that are hopefully translating, and then sign a couple free agents, extend Cease, and I think you can piece this together, but they should absolutely 100% without hesitation trade those bullpen arms and maybe 1 or 2 bats. And I think they could actually end up replenishing their farm system more than any team in baseball, maybe besides the Guardians when they trade Bieber.
Yep.
But that's about it.
No, I don't think the White Sox win the AL Central this year, even if they hold pat or look to improve. They're not going to look to improve. If anything, they're going to sell. But yeah, man, I think you might have to look at a retool situation. Minnesota's not looking at a retool situation.
No.
They're leading their division, but they're 2 games under 500. This is the worst division in recent memory, and I don't think it's close. I can't think of a year where a division was this crappy. You've got Kansas City that's 19 and 51 or something. You got the White Sox that suck. The Tigers that, they won some games early, but they're not looking hot at all. Cleveland can't do anything. Like, this is the worst version of the Cleveland Guardians that we could have possibly forecasted in 2023. Then you've got Minnesota, who we thought, could have decent talent. Like, I negated it because I was so high on them in 21. I'm like, okay, I can't get burned by the Minnesota Twins again. But, you thought that they could be really talented. They started incredibly hot. The pitching was great. Carlos Correa is hitting like 210. Like, it's just, it's no bueno. Everybody's sucking in this division. So my overarching question is, do the Twins have enough non-shitty ammo to win this shitty division?
Yeah. Yeah. And I this isn't me being stubborn. I'll already admit I was too bullish on the Twins. I liked them. I really did. And I think, I hope this doesn't come off as an excuse. You can tell me if it does. But for Twins fans, I could feel how they're kind of sitting there and just being like, man, why us? Because Tyler Mahle, I mean, that trade looks terrible now, but who would have thought he'd be this hurt? We knew he had some shoulder issues in the past. Who would have thought he'd be this hurt? You look at the lineup, the whole Correa saga to end up getting him at the cost that they got him at financially. That would look like a monster win. They get Royce Lewis back ahead of schedule. Edouard Julien mashes his way to the big leagues. Joey Gallo ends up not being a bad addition. So you're thinking, okay, like, why is this team sucking? But it's just been a little bit of just everything, like a couple areas across the board. And I think it's just kind of weighed them down. You look at the lineup, Buxton and Correa being hurt and unproductive. That really kills you in the rotation. Tyler Mahle not being available, that really hurts. But I still think the rotation should be better. Pablo Lopez, a 4-4, like, who would have thought that? Then you look at the bullpen. You got Joan Duran, but how about the guy you went out and got is now on the IL and struggling with issues that go beyond performance. I mean, you hope he's all right. And Jorge Lopez, dealing with anxiety, and like, we've come to understand, like, that affects a lot of players, especially relievers, I think, too. So he's dealing with that. And that was supposed to be a big part of their bullpen. It just seems like it's been a series of unfortunate events. And then, of course, Jorge Polanco has struggled to stay on the field at all. It's just tough. But that said, like, is there a team in this division that stacks up to them in terms of depth and talent? I don't think so.
Not even.
I don't think it's close. I still think this team is comfortably better than everybody else. Maybe besides the Guardians, if they're clicking on all cylinders.
Dude, I mean, the Guardians have no slug in that lineup. If the Guardians don't do something drastic at the deadline, like, I think the Minnesota Twins can crawl and take a nap on their way to an AL Central title.
Yeah, it's just, and the thing for me too, like, okay, I'll ask you this. What does it look like? Like, what does the best version of the Twins look like? What does it require for them to, be a clear division winner? I'm not saying limping to this finish line. I'm saying be the Twins that I thought they'd be.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I think.
I think Pablo Lopez needs to lower that ERA well under 4. I think he's got to be a low to mid 3s guy by the end of the year. I think he's got to throw like a sub 3 for the next couple months. I think Joe Ryan needs a couple of bounce back starts. They need somebody behind Duran. Brock Stewart has been awesome in 22 appearances out of the pen for them, but like, they need an Emilio Pagan to get really good really quickly. They need a Griffin Jacks to get really good really quickly because they've been just fine. So that's what I think they need from the bullpen and on the hill. Like, Lopez needs to tick up. Joe Ryan needs to regain that awesome form that he was having, but I'm fine with a 3-3 from Joe Ryan. Sonny's been awesome. Bailey Ober's been awesome. Varland's been bad. I'm not worried about.
But Varland, that's your 5, and he still gives you some quality starts. He gets blown up a little bit with the long ball, misses over the middle. Yeah. But you get Chris Paddock potentially back at the end of the year. Kenta Maeda might be healthy as well in a few weeks.
So offensively, I think that's where you got to look. Yeah. I need Christian Vasquez not to suck. I need Byron Buxton not to relatively suck. I need Carlos Correa not to relatively suck. Max Kepler, not relatively. Like, all these guys, relative to what we know they can do, kind of suck right now.
Yeah. And I'm looking at it right now. I think it's clear as day. The pitching's fine. Like,
Yeah,
I think the bullpen, they could go out and get a bullpen arm. That's fine. That's the one area of the trade market where you'll be able to go get bullpen arms. That's fine. You can do that.
It's this lineup, man. Like
It's the
everybody's
lineup.
underperforming except Julian and Gallo, I guess. That's it.
How many players in the lineup do you think have, or do you have the numbers in front of you, or can I ask you this
I've
trivia
got the
question?
numbers.
Don't look for a
sorry.
sec.
Yeah.
How many players with at least 100 plate appearances in this lineup or just on this team do you think have an OPS over 800?
Let's see. I know the heavy hitters are Gallo at 780 and Julian at like 790. Is it one? Is it Kirilloff? Is it one?
Yes. It's just Kirilloff at 806.
Dude.
So you have, you just go through the lineup. Everybody's either low 700s or high 600s. And it's weird. The one thing that gives me hope with this lineup and this team is they have a lot of options that I still do believe in. Edouard Julien, I think, is a great platoon piece. And they need to platoon it together here. That's the way that I think they need to go. Royce Lewis, he's getting his feet under him. He's hitting 281. He's just not walking and not quite slugging to what we're used to. I think he's going to be good and be a good piece for them. There's still a world where Jose Miranda gets going and comes back, but that could be a trade chip for them. Yeah. They have a lot of trade capital, a lot, both at the upper levels of the minors, and the system's not bad. But they could trade a Matt Wallner. They could trade a Trevor Larnach, especially with the performance of Kirilloff. They could trade Nick Gordon, who's hurt, but I think there's teams that may have some interest in him. And then they have a system that's fine to be able to trade from. They need to go get a bat. I think they'll do it. But I also think that their guys have to turn it around. And I think they need to stop looking at Max Kepler, and they need to find a way to get those at-bats more to Edouard Julien and Alex Kirilloff. Kepler's hitting 189 with a 625 OPS. I think this is the point of the season, Jack, where it's like chopping block time. If you're not performing, we got to trim the fat. Yes. Whether that means going to the bench or trading you. There's a team that would take a flyer on Kepler. I bet the Braves would probably take him. Like, I'm sure. And then he'd be good for them. They need to trim the fat and kind of reassess, because I think there's guys that would help them that are not getting enough at-bats. That's what it is to me.
I'm with you. Christian Vasquez, unfortunately, probably an untouchable deal at $10 million a year for the next 3 years. Signed 3 years, 30 ahead of this year. Vasquez is brutal this year. So you can't move him. You look for a catching upgrade. You may have it with Jeffers, maybe not. But yeah, man, like, you got to trim the fat with Kepler. I'm also thinking, we talk about the starting pitching depth for them. Do you move off of a struggling Simeon Woods Richardson and see what you can get when you cash in there? Do you move off of Balazovic and see what you can get if you cash in there? Brent Hedrick is another guy.
And then they've got lower level guys that they could move.
Canarino is their big ticket one. Like, you could move Canarino for a guy if you really want to make a splash.
And they've shown the willingness to do that. I don't know if after that Tyler Mahle deal, they'll be nervous to trade a Christian Encarnacion Strand or a Spencer Steer. But that trade in the moment, I was like, oof, that's a lot to give up. That's a lot to give up. They felt like they weren't giving up a ton of upside, but they gave up some high floor bats there. I think they can reassess. Maybe they'll trade from the lower levels, or they'll trade from, the Matt Wallners of the world. But the last thing I'll say on this team is I still think that they're going to find a way. And I just feel like they just have to be a decent offense to win this division. And I think that they have the goods to be a decent offense. I'm very interested to see how they handle things, though, because they need to figure out who's getting these ABs and how to allocate it to the guys that are going to be more productive for them, because there's too many giveaway at bats right now. And they should see if Mitch Garver is available. Maybe they can get a little mulligan on the Mitch Garver deal and get him back.
That'd be good.
But man, they could definitely use a catcher. But I think Jeffers is a fine other option. He's been pretty good this year, and he's a good defender.
Yeah, I will tell you, I am IDing absolutely nobody in this lineup in So Rare if I'm looking to add a teensy bit better.
Alex Kirilloff, bro. I picked him up on So Rare.
Okay, there we go. So join our Just Baseball League on So Rare. It's the perfect blend of digital collectibles and fantasy baseball. It's like the best version of fantasy baseball that you will play. Kirilloff is a good pickup on there. Julian is probably a low budget pickup that I will think about because I'm a sucker for some Eddie Julian in my life. So yeah. I might be looking at that cat.
Yeah. So, and for those that may be hearing about it the first time, I'm sure you're not, because I've got so many DMs of people telling me how hooked they are on it and how much they're enjoying it. You click the link in our description, you join our league for free. We have new merch. We're giving it out to those who, win each week in our league, but also if you do really well in our league, that means you're doing well in the, worldwide So Rare League as well, which it puts you in both competitions, and you can win really good rewards, really, really interesting stuff beyond the JB merch. But also, if you want to get into the collectible side, you can start buying those limited cards and entering higher stakes competitions, where I say higher stakes, it's just higher rewards competitions. All you have to do is have a limited lineup. I have mine. I pieced it together for pretty cheap. I think it was like $20 all in. And I was able to pick up Taj Bradley, Albert Alzolay, Luis Arraez in the beginning of the year. Austin Riley was like a big splash for me. And then Michael Conforto, Alex Verdugo. That's my limited lineup. I need those guys to really perform to win. But even if I hang around, then I get a free limited card in return as a reward. And then I usually either sell that for $10 and put that towards picking up another player like Kerry Carpenter or Alex Kirilloff, or just continue building my depth on my limited lineup so I can start mixing and matching when I set it up week to week. So obviously the matchups, you want to pick hitters against bad pitching teams and pitchers against bad hitting teams. And the more pitchers and hitters I have, the more creative I can get. So always happy to answer questions that you have if you want to get into the limited side and into those competitions, but draft your team for free, have fun with us, and just try to win. It's a lot of fun.
And the link's in the episode description. Go to sorare.com and join our Just Baseball League. I want to wrap with the Houston Astros. And I want to ask you, is it time to validate the Houston Astros struggles? Because I certainly am guilty of this. And I know that you and Peter are probably pretty guilty of this too, where we say, oh, it's the Astros, not worried. They've lost 5 in a row, 7-10. They're 6.5 back at Texas. LA has bunny hopped them. The Angels have bunny hopped them. Seattle's 2.5 back of them. And they're not getting healthy anytime soon, man. Jordan's dealing with that oblique issue. Lance McCullers is done for the year. He underwent surgery. Like, they've got France and Belak starting games for them, and they're consistently running out their B team lineup. It's kind of a nerve-wracking time for the team that we thought was invincible.
Yeah, I mean, no Luis Garcia, Urquidy, shoulder discomfort. I mean, that's been since end of May. And, great. You have an elite bullpen. Your offense is middle of the pack.
It's hard to get to that bullpen.
And the starting pitching isn't good overall, like relative to what we're used to.
Yeah.
Obviously, Framber, Javier are great. And Hunter Brown has been a great 3. But that 4-5. And that's what is it now? Ronel Blanco and JP France? Is that
so? Is Belak still starting games for him?
No, he just got sent down, and they brought up Sean Dubin.
Okay.
So who's going to make his debut if he didn't already? It is time. I'm glad you brought it up, Jack. It's time. Their outfield that they're running out right now is Chas McCormick, Jake Myers, and Kyle Tucker. And I mean, we're talking about Corey Julks getting a lot of looks.
Yep.
I know you love Mauricio Dubon, but he's getting a lot of looks.
Dubon's a 300 player. He's that slash line.
And it has to be hitting 300 to be productive. He's 289 right now, so it's tough. Yeah. He's a good player, though. He's been one of their better bats.
And he's versatile. Yeah.
Kyle Tucker, I don't want to place it on him because he's been one of their best hitters this year, but I was always expecting Kyle Tucker to make that MVP candidate leap, kind of like we saw Austin Riley make. And I know he's struggling this year too, but not as worried about him. I expect more out of Kyle Tucker, especially in this position. Jeremy Pena, I think we understand that Pena's better than this, but it's kind of going to be a high 700s OPS guy with great defense and, just a good player at shortstop. But Bregman is really disappointing this year. Altuve is coming back, so I'm not going to put much on that. And then Abreu's been the biggest disappointment in baseball. Yeah. I think it's him or a couple other guys that you could float. I guess what's the path, similar to the Twins question, Jack, what's the path to this Astros team being the Astros that we know? Because all the things we said about the Dodgers in terms of, I don't think any of us were saying Dodgers won't be good, but especially me, I was saying, this is the most vulnerable Dodgers team we've seen in a while, which I still think it is, relatively speaking. They're always the best team on paper. This is definitely the most vulnerable Astros team we've seen in some time. What is a World Series contender Astros look like to you? What needs to change?
That's a hard one for me to answer, because I thought the thing that made them the big bad Houston Astros is done for the year. Luis Garcia is out. McCullers is out. Urquidy is out. I thought Hunter Brown was the 6 going into this year. And I said, my God, with Brown as the 6, this is the best team in baseball, and it's not fucking close. If their offense puts up 2 runs a game, they're going to win 100 games 2-1. That's how I viewed them going into this year. I looked at the pitching. I looked at the combination of the best deep rotation in baseball and the best deep bullpen in baseball. And I said, they're not going to get touched.
Yeah.
But the offense isn't helping. Jordan is out for, it looks like, through the All-Star break. Here's my thing on Tucker. I think, real quick on Jose Abreu, I think Abreu has been up there. I think Julio Rodriguez is up there too. Julio has been one of the bigger disappointments of the year for me. But Abreu is certainly there. I thought Abreu was just going to add to the big bad machine that is the Houston Astros, and he's not doing it. But Tucker, I think we're seeing a subdued version of Kyle Tucker because there's nobody else to really worry about at this point. Yeah. Yes, you had to worry about Jordan, but that was when Altuve was out. Altuve is back. You worry about Tucker and Altuve. You mentioned Bregman has been disappointing. You can ID Kyle Tucker in every single pitcher's meeting at 3 p.m. Every single one, and say, here's how you beat Kyle Tucker. Figure out everybody else.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. I think you're really game planning for Tucker and Altuve at this point and kind of riding it out the rest of the way. This, though, the path for me, as I see this team, I think will all kind of lead us to the answer of how concerned we should be. They need another starter. That's first and foremost.
Which that would have been tail end, bottom of my totem pole for the Houston Astros coming into this year.
Yeah, I think we might see Forrest Whitley at some point this year. It's like that. They need an outfielder bad. And I think there's a world where Yainer Diaz starts getting some looks at first base and DH. That's their backup catcher, by the way, rookie, who's bat first. And I've heard nothing but fantastic things about the way this guy swings the bat back to when he was in the minors. And some people were telling me that in the Astros org that he makes hitting look as easy as anybody. And I think he's just starting to get settled in. He's very aggressive, but the bat to ball skills are really impressive. Diaz might be a guy that kind of has to be that breakout for them. When are they getting Michael Brantley back? Is he ever coming back? Or is this, I think Brantley, it's a similar to Joey Votto type thing, arthroscopic shoulder surgery. Don't know if he's going to be able to swing it much. He apparently had a setback, but he did take batting practice on the field Saturday. I don't know what you can expect from Brantley, but man, that's a guy that's got to be a saving grace. That's somebody that has to be a game changer for you. But other than that, you need a starter, you need outfield production, and you need Jose Abreu to figure it out. Which do you feel the most confident about? I think they can figure out the outfield because Kyle Tucker's got one spot. Jordan, let's just call him a DH for the sake of this thought exercise.
Yeah.
Chaz McCormick is fine.
Chaz/Myers is fine in center.
Chaz/Myers is fine. You got to find a better option than Corey Julks. You hope that that's Michael Brantley, and then maybe you can go get a platoon guy at the deadline. You can piece it together out there.
So that's the thing, man. I look at AAA depth. I look at internal options to be that other guy that isn't Corey Julks, and I see Justin Dearden, who has been fine, but not the Justin Dearden from a year ago. I see Bly Madris, and you don't want to count on that guy at all. I see Pedro Leon, who has been somewhat disappointing, and Leon has been a top 5 prospect for them for what seems like 8 years at this point. It's really hard to look at that AAA roster and say, yeah, somebody on that roster can help them right now.
I'll plug my friend because I think he can give it. I think he could give him a shot. Is Joey Loperfido?
Yep.
He's too far off right now, but a few months, it might be worth a shot. This dude's AA, 24 years old. He's playing every position, by the way. He's played center. He's played second. He's played first. He's played left. He's played right. He's got 10 home runs, 13 stolen bases in Double-A, hitting 296, 416, 543. I don't know if he would hit at the big league level. I don't know, like right now. I think he will. I think he's gonna be a really good player.
Yeah.
But they might have to get aggressive with some prospects even too. They'd have to consider that. There's a lot of different ways that they're gonna have to look. This is still a team that I think is always going to be aggressive. They're going to have to be aggressive, but it's not like they have a lot of big league ready pitching depth or depth in general. Someone we talked about on the call-up recently that might be an option is
Quincy Hamilton.
And I think Quincy Hamilton, but we're talking about the Houston Astros.
It's the Astros.
Why are we trying to find diamonds in the rough in the minor leagues?
The defending world champs, and we're talking about a 25-year-old Quincy Hamilton that just got up to triple. Yeah.
So they've got to find outfield help. At what point do you think like the ship has sailed on Jose Abreu?
That's a hard one for me to answer, and like a kind of impossible one for me to answer, because that guy, like, that was the guy for the Chicago White Sox for me. So I don't want to give up on Abreu, but at this point this year, I look at Abreu this year, unfortunately, in a similar way to how we had to look at Votto last year pre-injury, like just a shell of his former self. Abreu looks brutal. Am I hoping for a bounce back next year? I am. I'm hoping he's 30 and 100 ribbies next year. That's not this year. No fucking shot he even gets on a subdued pace for a month. Like Abreu looks like a shell of his former self.
So what do you do? Like, do you start cutting his ABs back?
I guess. I mean, you mentioned it, Yainer Diaz.
Yainer Diaz is a better option right now.
Yeah, like that's probably the answer for Abreu.
How soon? Like All-Star break or sooner?
All-Star break.
I mean, but you're talking about this team scuffling. And
I think if they've lost 5 in a row, I think if they have a losing week this week, you got to really start thinking.
I agree. I legitimately, by the next time you and I record an episode, I think we got to revisit this exact topic, because the 39 and 34 as we record this, the Angels are ahead of them playing great ball. The Rangers are, arguably top 3 team in baseball. I don't even think it's very arguable. And that's in their own division. And then you're going to have to edge out for the wild card, the Orioles, the Yankees, if they get healthy and get things going. That's going to be hard. That's a tall task.
Yep.
So this season can get away from them if they don't, have a little bit of urgency. But again, what does urgency look like? I think urgency looks like their stars performing. If Alex Bregman plays like Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve plays like Jose Altuve, Kyle Tucker plays like Kyle Tucker, and Yordan Alvarez comes back, this team should be fine.
They're fine.
I don't know if they're a World Series contender. They have some things they need to figure out, but they're a playoff team. And then you get this team to the playoffs. Framber, Javier, Hunter Brown. Not as sexy as we thought it would be, but Framber, I put him up against anybody. I said that. Javier in the playoffs, put him up against anybody. And then Brown is your 3.
Brown's awesome.
That's fine. And then you've got one of the best bullpens in the postseason. You can figure it out that way. So for me, you got to get there, 1, which I think they got to find one more arm, and 2, they need the guys to hit. But if they get there, they got a shot. So another team where it's like, welcome to uncharted territory. What are you going to do about it?
Yep. They go play the Dodgers in LA this weekend. And
that's a great sink or swim series.
Yep. And we will talk after that sink or swim series. Peter and you and Peter are going to talk tomorrow. Safe travels, hombre. You're headed to Heathrow.
Thank you. Yeah. So stay tuned with me on Twitter. I'll probably just be flying around in London. Going out there for that
Ted Lasso tour. Are you going to go look at the pub?
I've never watched that show. But I maybe it became a little too pop culture for me. And I'm not trying to be like a contrarian. It just was like almost too much. Too much.
I'm on Succession, and Kieran Culkin does something to his window in like episode 3, and I'm a little deterred. So I gotta figure out how to trudge my way through Succession. But Lasso 1 and 2 are good. Season 3 is no bueno, but then they run through the tape with the series finale. So if you're looking for something to do on your flight to London, I know you're probably just going to say fire away with questions and buy the Wi-Fi on Prospect Twitter.
I love doing that, doing that. But you know what I will be doing is finishing up the Brewers' top prospects, which you should check out on the call up. Or sorry, Why do I always do that? Mariners top prospects, which will be broken down on the call up very soon. That'll be on justbaseball.com very soon, and continuing to update the top 100 list. But I'm going to regret this, but I'm just going to put it out there. If you all have any content ideas, I was talking about this with Peter yesterday at the office. If there's something you want to see me do in London, within reason, tweet at me. I don't know if you want me to do like some man on the street, some questions you want me to ask people. I'm going to be there with my sister's out there. I'm visiting her. My girlfriend's coming with me. My mom's going to be there. So it's a family trip, but I've made it clear that it's business too. And I'm ready to clown around Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with some British folk. I love our British. We have a weird amount, in the best way possible, of British listeners. Yeah. Like I'm not saying we got a million, but we have a fair amount of British listeners, and I'll credit Peter Pratt for that in part. I don't know if he has anything to do with that. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm doing a little bit of I'm meeting a couple folks for a pint, which I'm looking forward to. Couple listeners that reached out and like, oh, I heard you're coming. Like, so if you're out there for whatever reason, if I got a minute, I would love to say hello and meet some of my favorite baseball fans across the pond. Let's grow the game in London.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I know that they are active, and they're active on social media too. So we love hearing from all you guys on social media. But no, that's going to be fun. I want some photos of you and Pratt and everybody else getting the pint at the pub. And as an ode to Tim Robinson, I would like for you to go to Buckingham Palace and see if you can make the soldiers laugh.
I think they're battling heat stroke right now.
Are they?
Did you see the one? Oh, there was one that like passed out the other day.
Yeah, and
they dragged him off by his feet, bro. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Shout out the King's Guard, baby.
Oh yeah, one of the weirdest things we still do. All right, you know how I feel about royalty. Oh shit, I forgot about that. I've got some stuff under my belt on the airwaves about royalty and the royal family.
Yes, you do. You don't understand what they do. I don't understand what they do either. So
I'm gonna try to find out.
If you see him, hey, it's God Save the King now, not God Save the Queen. Just FYI.
Yeah, I'm abstaining from that joke. Not saying it. Saying it. Just to say it didn't work.
All right, Peter and Arm. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. See you guys.